All right, this is Becca Meyer, and I'm here with Richard Ryan at the library in Grand Island, Nebraska. The time is 2 o'clock on the 6th of November, 2016. I'm going to start off with some preliminary questions about yourself, like when and where you were born, and what you do for a living, about your family.
Well, I was born here in Grand Island, and we did move around somewhat when I was a child. But after Vietnam, I came back here to Grand Island, and I worked for the Veterans Hospital for a little over 30 years as an operating room technician, and I'm presently retired.
Okay. And you have a family here in Grand Island?
I do.
All right.
Let me tell you about how many I have, or...
Sure.
Okay. Well, we have, I've been married for a little over 25 years, and I have, we have 6 children, and one presently going to college, and the rest are all living elsewhere and married and living elsewhere.
Right. So we'll start off with questions in the war then now. What were you doing prior to the war starting, or prior to your awareness of the war?
Before I went into the military? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I was in high school before I went into the service. And I graduated in 1966. And that's when I went into the military.
Was that like right after you graduated then?
Right. I went in, actually I went in graduated in May of 1966 and went into the military in June.
Oh, wow.
And I entered the United States Navy and went to boot camp, and then before I went into the service, though, I had a recruiter that kind of guided me into what I might want to do in the service, and that was, I decided I wanted to be in the medical field. So he put me down as a corpsman, and that's what I went to schooling to become a corpsman, which is the same thing as a medic in the Army.
Oh, okay.
And I went to some schooling in San Diego, California, and then after graduating there, I worked in the hospitals in San Diego, and then I decided I wanted to further my education and went to operating room school for 6 months. Then after that, I was stationed in an air base in Lemoore, California, and then I went from there. From there, I went to Vietnam, and I was a surgical technician in Vietnam, kind of like a MASH unit type setup. And I spent 13 months there, and then after that, I got out of the service then.
Okay. Do you have any distinct memories from your experience during the war?
Oh yeah, I have.
Or,
I mean, most guys do that
yeah.
have been into any kind of war, but yeah, I just remember the amount of casualties we had, and I was pretty young. I was only 21, I think, at the time, and I distinctly remember a lot of the gruesome casualties that we had, and I might mention too that I was also in Desert Storm in 91.
Oh, wow.
As same thing as a surgical technician too. So.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel like your experience was different than or do you feel like you had a unique experience as a medical.
What are you saying now?
I don't really, I'll think about the question
Okay,
a little more.
sure.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Was there anyone that you treated that you remember, or any?
Well, there were so many,
cases?
and I guess the guys that I remember that I treated were the ones that were that was really hurt badly. Those are the ones that you really remember. Like amputations and things like that. That were, and at a young age that kind of hits you. It's pretty traumatic, when you're really young like that, and you've never seen that stuff before. And one day you're at home, and the next day you're over there, and you're seeing all this traumatic injuries and whatnot, though. So, but yeah, there are several that I do remember. I don't remember their names, but I remember what happened to them.
So, what was your understanding of why the U.S. was involved in Vietnam at
What
that
was my
time?
understanding at the time? I really don't think I had an understanding. I don't even think I knew that much about it. I mean, we didn't have the news like we do today. For instance, like when I was in Desert Storm and we had the news constantly, we had that was on TV. And I think at a young age, I really didn't pay that much attention to the news either because I was so young. And I just remember that I had some guys right after boot camp tell me that they said, "Well, you're a corpsman in the Navy, so that means you'll be going to Vietnam." And I went, "Well, I'm in the Navy, I'll probably be like on board a ship or something." But they explained to me, and the recruiter hadn't explained to me that the medics that serve in the Navy are the medics that serve in Vietnam for the Marines.
Okay, I'll start again. So I'm not sure if it picked up that last part about. You said there were you and 3 other guys, and you're just excited to.
I had 3 other friends when we were in high school that decided we were going to go into the military because I don't think any of us could afford to go to college, and I really didn't want to go to college. So we thought, well, let's just join the Navy. That's kind of cool. And we were, after we got our physicals and they told us that we were now in the military, that we were pretty proud of that. I was just not aware of the fact that, that I, being a corpsman or a medic would have sent me over to Vietnam. I wasn't aware of that at all. And I wasn't really aware of, I think I knew that Vietnam was going on, but I just don't think that was what I was thinking about at all, just wanted to be in the military, so.
So this will go with that, like talking about how informed people were about the war. Did you watch a lot of news during that time
No.
period?
Well, we just had this old black and white TV, and they did have the news. I think we had 3 channels, and they had nightly news. I think, but I just never watched it. I was out running around with my friends and having a good time. But even when I was in the military, we didn't. Most of us guys didn't keep up on it. When we were on base or anything, we didn't watch that much TV. But yeah.
So other than the people you knew from high school, was there anyone else that you knew involved in the war, either in combat or?
You mean that I stayed in touch with? You mean? Oh, not really. Just the 3 guys that one has since passed away, like last year, but just the guys that I went in the military with, I do keep in touch with them once in a while. They went their separate ways, You know, we went in on what they call a buddy system, but we ended up being split up because we all had different jobs, and I was the only one that was a corpsman,
Okay.
and the rest of them were like, oh, they were all on board ships, and I was the unlucky one, I guess.
Do you know anything about what their experience was like, or?
Yeah, we got together here a while back, and just the fact that they were on board ship, and most of them liked being on board a ship, but I think I was the only one that kind of complained about having to go to Vietnam and not ever being, being a sailor and not ever having a chance to be on board a ship.
Yeah.
So.
So then, with your personal opinion of the war, would you say that you support did you support the U.S. involvement in
Vietnam? Well, I'm not so sure I supported it. I don't know if I even had a real opinion at that young age. At the time, most of us that were over there were just kind of doing our time, and I was desperate. I wanted to come home, of course. The minute I got there, I wanted to come home. But it's 13 months is a long time to be exposed to that kind of an environment. It's a long time. And I saw a lot of pretty nasty things. And but I'm proud to have served, and we kind of lost that war. We kind of came in second, and that's what's more disheartening than anything, And when I came home, there wasn't a whole lot of, good job, Rich, and it was just kind of, well, you're home and that's it. Nobody really talked about it that much. Not even my parents. I just came home and I'd done my time, and Vietnam I was there in 69 and 70, and it went on till I think 75, but I never even heard much about it even on the news after I came home. It was just such a thing that everybody was used to, and just unlike when I was in Desert Storm, that didn't last as long, but people, we did a pretty good job, and when we came home, they celebrated our coming home, and they didn't do that when I was, it's well-known fact they didn't do it when I was in Vietnam. When I came home, my dad picked me up from the airport in California, and that was it. I was home.
Nothing else said about it.
It's my friends, when I came home, it's just like, they kind of acted like, well, gee, Rich, where have you been? We had a party last weekend, it was just such a long, drawn-out affair, that.
Do you feel like we could have done anything differently?
Well, we could have kept on going, I suppose, and I think we probably could have started advancing into North Vietnam instead of staying behind what they call the DMZ. I don't know if you're aware of what that is or not. That's the line between North and South Vietnam. But if we would have advanced maybe into North Korea or North Vietnam, that maybe we would have been able to have done more good. I don't know.
I'm going to stop it again.
I think most of us were just over there and even before, guys were concerned about being drafted maybe, or I think they were more scared to be drafted, or the ones that did go in and had to serve over there, they were just anxious to get back home, and nobody ever really complained about the war itself and what we were trying to accomplish. I don't think that I heard anyway, and when I was over there, we had a newspaper, was called Stars and Stripes, and they had this was in 1969, and I remember they had a newspaper that had a big picture of us landing on the moon, at that time, and I thought, I guess the only time it really struck me was here we are, all this technology in 1969, and we're on the moon, and I'm over here with a bunch of other guys, fighting in a really primitive kind of war,
Yeah.
It was just kind of a strange feeling. I just distinctly remember that, feeling that kind of angry about that, that we have to be over here and I'm away from home and struggling, and people are over the United States and we've landed on the moon.
Let's see, 16. There were a lot of things that happened during 69.
Yeah, there were 69 and 70. Yeah, well, then the styles changed too, and everybody was, when we were over there, we were hearing that people were wearing bell bottoms, and you could buy and people were, you could, when I was over there, you could order, well, you could take like they gave you a 5-day R&R to go like to Japan or Australia or other places, and a lot of times the guys would go over there and they would buy cameras or they would buy like a 3-piece suit, tailor-made 3-piece suit, or try to get a hold of some bell-bottom pants and stuff, because in a year you don't realize how much goes on in a year unless you've been, that there's that culture shock. You go from where you normally feel comfortable in your home, and then you go to this other place, and there's people that are, they look like they're starving to death, and the Vietnamese are living in cardboard houses, and you're seeing all this for the first time, and it's hard to believe, and then you go back home, and there's that little bit of culture shock there because you have been used to this other life for a year, and you come back home and you've got people that are dressing differently and protesting the war. And I was never a protester. I was just glad to be home.
Next question is what did the war mean to you? If you could describe it in the.
I think I already told you that.
Yeah.
What does it mean to me today? I don't know. That's a tough one. I guess it's just, I put it back in the past and I don't think about it much. Try not to.
Yeah. That's understandable. This is kind of a similar question. If you could explain the war in one word, what would it be? And can you elaborate on why you chose that word?
Well, it was a war in one word.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it was chaos. That's the only word I can really think of, because it was so, I'm living in a protected life pretty much, and when I go over there, it was just, the minute you step off the plane, you can hear bombs and mortars and, gunfire, and you hear that every day and every night for a year, and then you hear helicopters coming in that are bringing in wounded, and it's just, 13 months of that, just daily. And chaos is a good word, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, young lives wasted, I thought, and I think you just, I think you kind of numb yourself, and you have to wear blinders, that, you don't worry about why this is happening. You just take care of what you got in front of you, and that's it, yeah.
We started to talk about this, but what changes did you notice happening? Like you said, with bell-bottom pants and
I already said that, I think.
Yeah.
You know, those are the things that I noticed mostly, I think. And people's, I think I really noticed maybe people's attitude about the war. You know, it was becoming more, there's a lot more demonstrations going on. I didn't participate because in Nebraska, you didn't see that. You know, it was mostly on the bigger cities you saw that, I think. But yeah, I just pretty much numbed after it was all over, you know, for me anyway.
Yeah. So then, once the war was over, did life pretty much return to normal, or were some things permanently changed?
Yeah, I think it was. Are you running out of space here?
Oh yeah.
I'm not getting that question.
Did most of the people you know share the same kind of opinion that you had about the war? I guess since you said you didn't really have like a strong opinion at that time, but like did the
Or not?
yeah. So once the war was over, did life return to normal, or were some things permanently changed?
Well, I think for a while, for me, when I came home, everything was just kind of a fuzz. You know, I mean, I'd been in one craziness and then back to what was normal for me before I went. And I don't know, I think some people have heard of that term, 1,000-yard stare. And I think that's kind of what I had. You know, I was just kind of numb to a lot of things. And I had a job that I picked up. It was delivering milk, and it was just kind of bogus. You know, I didn't care for it at all. And I think I got married like 5 months after I came home, and I don't know, that didn't work out either. But I think there was just a lot of things. You know, I'd be outside mowing the yard or something, and I could hear helicopters coming in, even with the loud noise of the mower. I could still hear it and feel it. And I think that brought back memories, and I have since, that doesn't bother me anymore, but I think when I first came home it did. And I think I was kind of a bit upset because nobody really cared. It didn't seem like anybody cared that I was even over there, you know, and that was kind of hard. I was just kind of in a daze for a while, and then I got a job at the VA as a surgical technician, and that did help too. It was a pretty decent job. And
When was that then? When was that then that you started working?
I got that in 1970.
Oh, wow.
Shortly after I got home. And it was the same. I had this job, same job I had as when I was in the service as a surgical tech, but and that was a little different too, because I stepped right into the same job I had when I was over in Vietnam. So but it wasn't as chaotic, you know. So I was able to handle that okay.
So you've already like done this quite a bit, but kind of comparing the Vietnam War to like when you were involved in Desert Storm. Did you notice any similarities, differences?
Well, I was only there it didn't last very long. I was only in Desert Storm for about 3 months. So it was, but I still, I just distinctly remember when I was in Desert Storm, when I was over there, that I had this, I don't know if maybe it was just subconscious, but I had this feeling of mistrust for the government, because they had, it had been such a crazy, Vietnam was such a crazy thing, and that I thought, geez, are we going to get into another Vietnam, And I was a little bit afraid of that. I didn't want to be over there. I was 44 years old at the time too, and I just didn't want to be stuck over there another year or more.
Yeah.
Because I had all these thoughts and feelings about Vietnam and hoping that it wouldn't happen again. So, yeah.
Are there any lessons that you'd say that you've learned from the war, or things you would want others to remember about this time in history?
Well, I just hope to continue on, history classes and continue maybe talking about it more and try to understand that the guys that did go over there weren't all bad just because they were sent over there, because so many of them, people thought that they were baby killers and there was a terrible war and whatnot. But I'd just like the younger generation to know that it wasn't, that it was, definitely not a good war. War is not good anytime, but that it was fought and there was a lot of guys involved, and that hopefully they'll appreciate what they did do over there. And I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of respect for Vietnam veterans now because of some of the past wars that we've had, and that's really helped a lot too. I know I didn't bring this up before, but I do suffer from post-traumatic stress from Vietnam, but it's not terrible, but it's just something that my mind brings up a lot, It's,
And like you said, like a year of that, like.
yeah. And I guess not everybody suffers from that, but it's not a terrible thing. I held it inside for years, thinking that it was not a good thing to come. It was kind of a chicken thing to try to get help for, but I know today it's not, because there's a lot of guys today that have it and can get help for it too.
I guess that's kind of a somewhat positive thing that's come out of it, that we look at post-traumatic stress disorder differently, or
Do I look at it differently?
or would you say that's kind of a good thing that now we know more about it, or
Oh
that,
yeah,
like, people
definitely. I mean, especially for these young guys coming back from the wars today, that they know right away what's going on. In Vietnam, it was. I think it was known as shell shocked. That's what the old term was years ago. And of course, I'm 23 years old, came home from the war, and shell shocked is not what I was, but actually it was post-traumatic, stress disorder, and and I'm just glad that young kids now can get out for it, and was glad that I was able to step forward and thinking that, saying, hey, I've got a little problem here, I need some help, and I did get some. It was good, and it was very positive.
Sure. Okay. So would you say that your views have changed on the war over time?
I don't really think so. I think, like I said before, I really don't think that much about it anymore. But if it's ever brought up in conversation, I just kind of think, well, it was not a good time for our country, and but I was part of it, and I'm proud I was, and I don't have any misgivings. I'm just glad I survived it, because there's so many that didn't,
Do you think, how would you describe yourself during the war to now?
How do I describe myself?
Yeah, do you notice any distinct differences?
Than when I was, oh no, I'm still the youngster I always was. Not. I don't know. I think, you know, when you're young, you know, your mind isn't quite as developed as it is maybe when you're older too. You know, hopefully you become a little wiser and a little more mature, and I guess I have. And there's still a lot of kid in me, but your dad's got that too. But yeah, I don't think there's been as far as maturity, you know. Of course, I've changed, and my views about the war then and now are different because I'm older, and back then I think I was just anxious to do the best job I could with what I had, and that's it.
All right. Well, that's all the questions I have.
Good, I'm out of here. No, I'm just kidding. It's been a pleasure to help you out.
Thank you.